Hadith number 189. It was narrated that Abu Hurairah said, "The Messenger of Allah said, your Lord wrote for himself with his own hand before he created the creation, my mercy precedes my wrath." Hadith number 190. Talha bin Kirash said, I heard Jabir bin Abdullah say, when Abdullah bin Amr bin Haram was killed on the day of Uhud, the Messenger of Allah met me, and said, O Jabir, shall I not tell you what Allah has said to your father? Yahya said in his hadith, and he said, O Jabir, why do I see you broken-hearted? I, Jabir, said, O Messenger of Allah, my father has been martyred and he has left behind dependents and debts. He said, shall I not give you the glad tidings of that with which Allah met your father? I said, yes, O Messenger of Allah. He said, Allah never spoke to anyone except from behind a screen, but he spoke to your father directly, and he said, O my slave, ask something from me and I shall give it to you. He said, O Lord, bring me back to life so that I may be killed in your cause. A second time, the Lord, glorified is he, said, I have already decreed that they will not return to life. He said, my Lord, then convey this news to those whom I have left behind. Allah said, think not of those as dead who are killed in the way of Allah, nay, they are alive, with their Lord, and they have provision. Hadith number 191. It was narrated that Abu Hurairah said, the Messenger of Allah said, Allah will laugh at two persons, one of them kills the other, and both of them enter paradise, for the first one fought in the cause of Allah and was martyred, then his killer repented to Allah and became Muslim, then he also fought in the cause of Allah and was martyred. Hadith number 192. Sa'id bin Musayyab narrated that Abu Hurairah used to say, the Messenger of Allah said, Allah will seize the earth on the day of resurrection, and he will roll up the heavens in his right hand, then he will say, I am the sovereign. Where are the kings of the earth? Hadith number 194. It was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet said, when Allah decrees a matter in heaven, the angels beat their wings in submission to his decree, with a sound like a chain beating a rock. Then when fear is banished from their hearts, they say, what is it that your Lord has said? They say, the truth, and he is the Most High, the Most Great. He said, then the eavesdroppers from among the jinn listen out for that, one above the other, so one of them hears the words and passes it on to the one beneath him. The shahab, shooting star, may strike him before he can pass it on to the one beneath him, and the latter can pass it on to the soothsayer or sorcerer, or it may not strike him until he has passed it on. And he adds 100 lies to it, and only that word which was overheard from the heavens is true. Hadith number 195. It was narrated that Abu Musa said, the Messenger of Allah stood up among us and said 5 things. He said, Allah does not sleep, and it is not befitting that he should sleep. He lowers the scales and raises them. The deed done during the day is taken up to him before the deed done during the night, and the deed done during the night before the deed done during the day. His veil is light, and if he were to remove it, the glory of his face would burn everything of his creation, as far as his gaze reaches. Hadith number 196. It was narrated that Abu Musa said, the Messenger of Allah said, Allah does not sleep, and it is not befitting that he should sleep. He lowers the scales and raises them. His veil is light, and if he were to remove it, the glory of his face would burn everything of his creation, as far as his gaze reaches. Then Abu Ubaidah recited the verse, "Blessed is whosoever is in the fire, i.e. the light of Allah, and whosoever is round about it, and glorified is Allah, the Lord of all that exists." Hadith number 197. It was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet said, "The right hand of Allah is full and that is never affected by the continuous spending, night and day. In his other hand is the scale, which he raises and lowers. Have you seen what Allah has spent since he created the heavens and the earth? And that has not decreased what is in his hands in the slightest." Hadith number 198. It was narrated that Abdullah bin Umar said, "I heard the Messenger of Allah say, when he was on the pulpit, the compeller will seize the heavens and the earth in his hand, and he clenched his fist and began to open and close it. Then he will say, I am the compeller. Where are the tyrants? Where are the arrogant? He said, the Messenger of Allah was turning to his right and to his left, until he saw the pulpit moving from below, and I thought, what if it falls with the Messenger of Allah on it? Hadith number 199. Nawar bin Saman al-Kalabi said, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, there is no heart that is not between two of the fingers of the Most Merciful. If he wills, he guides it, and if he wills, he sends it astray. The Messenger of Allah used to say, O you who makes hearts steadfast, make our hearts steadfast in adhering to your religion. And he said, the scale is in the hand of the Most Merciful. He will cause some peoples to rise and others to fall until the day of resurrection. Hadith number 201. It was narrated that Jabir bin Abdullah said, the Messenger of Allah used to appear before the people during the Hajj season and say, is there any man who can take me to his people, for the Quraysh have prevented me from conveying the speech, i.e., the message, of my Lord. Hadith number 202. It was narrated from Abu Darda, that the Prophet said concerning the verse, every day he is engaged in some affair. His affairs include forgiving sins, relieving distress, raising some people and bringing others low. Hadith number 203. It was narrated from Muntir bin Jarrah that his father said, the Messenger of Allah said, whoever introduces a good practice that is followed, he will receive its reward and a reward equivalent to that of those who follow it, without that detracting from their reward in their slightest. And whoever introduces a bad practice that is followed, he will receive its sin and a burden of sin equivalent to that of those who follow it, without that detracting from their burden in the slightest. Hadith number 204. It was narrated that Abu Hurairah said, a man came to the Prophet, who encouraged the people to give charity to him. A man said, I have such and such, and there was no one left in that gathering who did not give him something in charity, to a greater or lesser extent. The Messenger of Allah said, whoever initiates a good practice that is followed, he will receive a perfect reward for that, and a reward equivalent to that of those who follow it, without that detracting from their reward in the slightest. And whoever introduces a bad practice that is followed, he will receive the complete burden of sin for that, and a burden of sin equivalent to that of those who follow it without that detracting from their burden in the slightest. Hadith number 205. It was narrated from Anas bin Malik that the Messenger of Allah said, every caller who invites people to misguidance and is followed, will have a burden of sin equal to that of those who follow him, without that detracting from their burden in the slightest. And every caller who invites people to true guidance and is followed, will have a reward equal to that of those who follow him, without that detracting from their reward in the slightest. Hadith number 206. It was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Messenger of Allah said, "Whoever calls people to true guidance will have a reward equal to that of those who follow him, without that detracting from their reward in the slightest. And whoever calls people to misguidance will have a burden of sin equal to that of those who follow him, without that detracting from their sins in the slightest." Hadith number 207. It was narrated that Abu Juhayfa said, "The Messenger of Allah said, whoever introduces a good practice that is followed after him, will have a reward for that and the equivalent of their reward, without that detracting from their reward in the slightest. Whoever introduces an evil practice that is followed after him, will bear the burden of sin for that and the equivalent of their burden of sin, without that detracting from their burden in the slightest." Hadith number 211. It was narrated that Uthman bin Affan said that the Messenger of Allah said, according to one of the narrators, Shubha, he said, "The best of you," and according to Sufyan, he said, "The most excellent of you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it." Hadith number 212. It was narrated that Uthman bin Affan said, "The Messenger of Allah said, the most excellent of you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it." Hadith number 214. It was narrated from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari that the Prophet said, "The likeness of the believer who recites the Quran is that of a citron, the taste and smell of which are good. The likeness of a believer who does not read the Quran is that of a date, the taste of which is good but it has no smell. The likeness of a hypocrite who reads the Quran is that of a sweet basil, the smell of which is good but its taste is bitter. And the likeness of a hypocrite who does not read the Quran is that of a colocynth, bitter apple, the taste of which is bitter and it has no smell."